Assalamu alaikum and welcome to In Conversation With. I am your host, Wasif Mahmood. We are honoured to be joined by one of Britain's most respected voices in political and social commentary, Dr. Daud Abdullah. Currently a director at Middle East Monitor, a leading researcher and news platform dedicated to delivering focused, comprehensive coverage of Palestine and its regional neighbours. His works include a history of Palestinian resistance and contributions to Islamic political radicalism, a European perspective, and American foreign policy, and the Muslim world. He has also edited the Israeli Law of Return and its impact on the struggle in Palestine. His articles have appeared in leading outlets such as The Guardian and Al Jazeera, offering sharp analysis and compelling perspectives on some of the most pressing issues of our time. Dr. Daud, just to start off, I mean, there's so much that you've been involved with. How did you think about jihad when you first came across it, and how has your thought about jihad changed over time?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is the result of historical studies, throughout my academic career. It was one of the issues that stood out, what was happening in the Americas. In Brazil in particular, that was the first area that really caught my attention. And not least because Brazil was the home of the largest a segment of the African diaspora outside of the United States. The relationship between, the diaspora and Africa was never severed by the Atlantic or by the slave experience itself.
Indeed.
So I came across, these uprisings that took place in the late 18th century, early 19th century in Brazil. I decided to write something about the jihad of Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio. Mm-hmm. And the Sokoto jihad, as it's sometimes referred to, was an intellectual jihad.
Yes,
It was based on scholarship. And so that aspect of our heritage in West Africa was something that caught my attention.
Just to understand the importance of the slave trade itself and what happened in that period of time.
Slave trade started around 1501, and it lasted for 3 centuries. Throughout that period, an estimated figure total of 15 million Africans were shipped across the Atlantic. But one estimates that, that figure may also run into the millions. It is estimated that between 1 and 2 million were actually Muslims. And that is based on the location from where they were taken, and also, those who in the Americas, by their names were identified as Muslims, because in a lot of the documents that were found throughout the period and in different places, you had names like Ayuba and Muhammad and Sisi and, all these names, Ali in some cases, all these names turning up in manuscripts. So there were about 2 million as an estimate who were brought to the Americas.
So this really is a significant period of history that we are looking at. I suppose it opens with your first chapter, I suppose, the Iberian Peninsula.
Yeah.
And looking at this particular section, I mean, we're always told about the importance of 1492 as a date, the discovery of America, but only a few months earlier, from August, if you had in February the fall of Granada. Yeah. Give us a little bit of an understanding of the type of people that were in Granada at the time.
Granada was, the seat of Muslim learning in Europe. Mm-hmm. One of the major cities in which scientific research was conducted, and writings on various aspects of human endeavor, astronomy, mathematics, medicine. This was the golden age of Islam, in Europe. It lasted for about 500 years.
What we call the Dark Ages, apparently, here in Europe, right?
Yeah. But then when we came to 1492, that's the year when Granada, the last of the Muslim kingdoms, collapsed. one has to put this in the context of the Crusades that, fought from since the 11th century right up to the Renaissance in the 16th century. And the tensions between Muslims and Christianity or Christendom never came to an end. So what happened was that, when the Granada fell, the King and Queen of Spain, of course, they went through this period of what was called the Inquisition, ordered the Inquisition, where people were forced either to accept Christianity and Catholicism in particular, either to accept Catholicism or leave. So Muslims in Spain at the time, and also Portugal, were referred to as the Moors because many of them came from North Africa, that part of the continent. So many of them were either driven out back to North Africa. Some came to the Caribbean and the Americas because that was the same year that Columbus embarked on his so-called journey to India. When Columbus was going, he said that he told the king and queen who sponsored his journey, he said that the proceeds from his endeavor would be used to reclaim Jerusalem. So there was this element of a crusading spirit from the very beginning.
Tell us a little bit about the journey of what happened with the Muslims that were in Brazil. Let's talk about that, because there's a big section in relation to that, and we find out a little bit more about what happens once they land and what the fight.
We can just before we get to that, let's just explain that the Anglo-Saxons felt that if these people became Christians, and the same religion with them, that would create a basis for, some kind of recognition of the humanity, and they would seek rights, freedom, and so on. And they had no intention, of offering their freedom. These people were brought to the Americas not to worship, but to work, and to generate wealth. They were like what? Instruments for production.
I mean, there is this question, and it goes through your book as well, the idea of whether or not it was economic or whether or not it was racial. And effectively, you come down the middle and say there's a joining link with regards to the idea of rebellion in terms of what exactly forced slavery apart, but also put it together and made it viable. This kind of journey that you got with slaves that came, what was their mentality? What was going through their head as to how they were going to approach this particular situation?
A great many of them were learned, accomplished scholars, because traditionally, young Muslims, and that's still the case today, when you reach the age of 8, 9, 10, you were sent off to learn, to memorize, the Quran and to sit under scholars. So many of those who were captured and brought to the New World were of that category. So what we found in the Americas was that they didn't make a huge effort to learn the European languages,
right?
Because it was not as important as preserving Arabic for them. Arabic was the lingua franca that they could use to communicate among themselves and to discuss, the mode of operation in terms of resistance. So when, a lot of in Brazil, after the 1835 rebellion in particular, a lot of documents were found, all written in Arabic, which of course the Portuguese couldn't decipher. Eventually, and the mayor of Bahia, later on, he ordered the burning of all these documents. In his view, it cut the link between, the diaspora and the homeland.
There is this kind of thought process, isn't there, with regards to the Portuguese themselves not being just doing the very minimum of what they needed to do in order to fulfill. So this has the potential already, we can see, of being very important to rebellion itself, because your language and the way you preserve it
Yeah.
is suggestive of the fact that actually we're going to be able to use that to our advantage at some point because we understand something that you don't.
Evidence of that was found not only in Brazil, but you found them you found similar evidences in Jamaica and in Cuba. Much of it came through the Arabic language itself.
And obviously, one of the things that we would like to pick up on an example, I suppose, of one of these rebellions, because so you do give that example in Brazil of that happening. Tell us how exactly that came about.
The Portuguese were the first to start the slave system and the last to abolish it. They held on to it. The slaves themselves, when they got news that this question of emancipation was being discussed, it created a sense of anticipation, expectation that their freedom is near.
Yeah.
The slave masters didn't want to give up. They wanted to hold on to it. And so when the slaves felt that their freedom was denied, unlawfully, that triggered a lot of the rebellions. So in Brazil, you had, 1835 was the big one. But from like 1806, 1807, right through, there were several other, uprisings across Brazil.
How does this concept of resistance feed into today's kind of understanding of injustice that we see around the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, the underlying, issue in Africa and in the Americas was that, Muslims were being subjected, and oppressed by, non-Muslims. And not only enslaved, like in Africa, you had the Muslims paying tribute to non-Muslims rulers. And that was a bone of contention, but, in several places. Why should Muslims, be not, to be ruled by a non-Muslim is bad enough. But to have the Muslim pay tribute, that was intolerable.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you say that, it's like what we find is exactly that. So we have this situation where, you have Palestine and the conflict, and it's been going on for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden, the main thing right now is they are sending weaponry to kind of bomb these particular places.
Yeah.
But we tend to send aid in food and stuff.
Yeah.
So we concentrate on the food and the rebuilding, but not the stopping of the weapons.
Yeah.
And so that kind of serious juxtaposition that we find ourselves in needs to be kind of jolted.
Well, I think in Palestine, you have an occupation, an illegal occupation, and then you have a movement, to expel the people. So I mean that is just crossing a red line. When you advocate, when you conduct policies that are, can be described as ethnic cleansing.
Yes.
Occupation is bad, but ethnic cleansing is tremendously worse.
Yes.
And that is the reality. And that's why you have, this pushback, from the indigenous people that, you were welcome, you were given sanctuary, you took more of the state than you were entitled to or given, and now you want to push us out.
One of the things that your book really brings out is the ability of showing that there is another way of looking at the world, another way of approaching injustice. How have you found that liberating, not only for yourself, but for how you are presenting options to people that want to find solutions?
I think, in the context of the African diaspora, knowledge is crucial. A knowledge of self, knowledge of one's history. It was Malcolm X that said, what a man without knowledge of himself is like a tree without roots. So that is, in the context of the diaspora, is fundamental. And for many of us in the Americas, the path to Islam came through, an intellectual, search for identity, for knowledge of one's history, and heritage. And that's how, many of us, ended up, becoming Muslims in the 70s.
Thank you so much today, Dr. Daud,
Thank you.
for your time and for your insight.
That's
Thank you very much.
Thank you.